And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight I'm delighted to welcome back my friend and yours, Tony D'Angelo. Tony, welcome back to the program.
Pleasure to have you.
And
Be with you. You have me.
for those who are a fan of Lee Elsey, this is the face behind Tony D'Angelo on Tuesday mornings on the Lee Elsey program on
Now they know what I look like.
94.9 FM on your digital dial there. So welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
We always have I think a fun and interesting freewheeling conversation on some of the topics of the day, a little speculation, and try to solve some of the world's problems. I'm not sure how successful we are, but we have fun doing it. And I again want to welcome you back. I brought a couple of books with me today, and one I'm in the middle of reading. It's called The Lincoln Miracle. A friend of mine who politically is polar opposite of me, and he loaned this to me, thought I'd find this interesting, and it's been really terrific dealing with the Republican Convention of 1860 with Lincoln's nomination, and talk about turbulent times then as I think we have now. Kind of, I think, the parallels are very interesting.
Yeah, same devil, different year. You're right.
So, I mean, we don't, our convention's a little different. They're scripted. There's primaries, which they didn't have at the time. They dealt with smoke-filled rooms and things of that ilk, and the candidates didn't hang around and schmooze at the conventions. They stayed apart. And
when approximately did the primary system start?
I think it's going into the the 20th century. I'm trying to think. It may have been post World War I.
I was going to say post-war, yeah.
And it gathered more steam after World War II, but I think the concept was, I don't know, it may have been Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, he certainly was not shy. But to see how the Lincoln came from dark horse to the nomination to the White House is kind of a fascinating story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's what a character the man had,
and how there's talk today that either we are heading towards, or some folks would argue that we're already in a domestic civil war. It's not the North versus the South, but it's certainly two sides that are not seeing eye to eye on almost anything.
Or is it two sides, Marty, or four, or five, or like we were talking, off air before we came over here, and I was watching the video of the Philadelphia, the gay pride parade ran into the pro-Israel parade, and they're fighting one another as they're just trying to, and I'm like, I mean, it's one of these things that would be funny if it weren't so sad.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm deeply concerned with the state of our nation.
I am too. It's troubling.
And it's a situation where things have happened so fast, and perhaps it's been actually happening over decades, maybe scores for that matter. But I would suggest that I think since the Obama administration, things have really taken we've gotten on a slippery slope. I mean, he campaigned on a transformation of America.
I will fundamentally change America.
And we're seeing the fruits of that labor now more so than during his own administration.
And sure enough, we are. I will fundamentally change America. And it's, I think personally we lost a lot when the second, or actually I like to call George W. Bush, King Bush II, I think we lost a lot there, starting with the offshoring of the defense industry, because that told us that we could no longer manufacture our own goods and services. What did Dwight D. Eisenhower say? a country that cannot manage its and manufacture its own goods and services cannot be called a superpower. Stupid old guy, what did he know, right?
And he's scoffed at by historians.
Yeah.
As a president, that is.
But there is a guy, I mean, and people listen to me as much as they can stand it, but, and they think I'm like, I don't want to see one public dollar spent. Politicians waste money, politicians are corrupt, and there's elements of truth in all of that, really. But what they don't get, and maybe I don't appreciate enough, is that you take a guy like Eisenhower who took the public dollar and did great things with it. You can argue, I mean, like the highway building might have gotten a little bit out of hand, and the expressway building in New York and the ripping of through in neighborhoods and things, but they did things positively with the tax dollar, as opposed to pretty much just taking the money, having some stupid program, hiring all your buddies that can't get a job anywhere else and throwing it in the street.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the ironies here. I mean, in this book with on Lincoln, is that as they're settling into this convention for the Republican nomination for president, is that a critical component is patronage, and
that's how cabinet members are made.
Who gets promised what and why, and who's getting what jobs, and we'll give you this and you give me that, and it's a lot of horse trading. It's not civil service as we know it today, although I wonder if it's any better today with the the labor unions controlling so much.
And I get torn about that. Is that my father was, you're talking about your dad on the way over, but my father was a union man. My father was the International Association of Theatrical and Stage Employees. So were his brothers, so were several of my cousins. I have several credited cousins in the theatrical trade before and in back of the camera. Another long story for another time. That all said, when I lost my father at an early age, and one of the discussions that we never completed was, Dad, why do we really need unions? What does the union do for you? And he would become very irate and livid at that, because as far as he was concerned, where on earth was a guy with a 7th grade education going to get the support needed to light and sound Broadway shows? And it's like, so I'm not anti-union, I'm not pro-union, I'm like, unions to me are sort of like tax dollars. What do you do with them? How do you make them better? How do you make them, because there are employers that will abuse employees without a union, as cruel as it may seem.
One of the things that I learned, and it was a terrific part of my own personal learning curve, is in government. When I first got involved in the mid-1980s and was running for city council, and I would talk with local union presidents and try to get engaged and find out what are you thinking and why, and what can be done. And we'd agree on some things and we'd disagree on some things. But one thing that I came to recognize, at least at that time, I mean, listen, the city has organized labor, and it's not going away. So we have a choice. We can be obstinate and try to dismantle it, which isn't going to happen, or you learn to negotiate and work with and try to find the best common ground you can for all parties. And generally speaking, it doesn't always work 100% for either side, but you try to find a relative happy medium and move forward. And neither side is getting pummeled. And I think that's kind of the practical approach. And as a Republican in London, I mean, I think I had the whether I was getting their vote or not, I'm not sure, but I had the respect, because I'd sit down and I would talk and listen and engage. And you can't really afford to, if you're in a minority position, to just dismiss segments of the community.
It's an interesting concept, why the Republicans have failed miserably in the cities year after year after year after year after year. And I mean, go back to, well, New York for years, right? They had Governor Rockefeller. People say, oh, he was a Democrat. He wasn't really a Democrat, but he wasn't exactly, you know, three to the right of Attila the Hun. I worked under the partners in the firm I was there were his assistants that were there with him in Albany in the 60s. I mean, they loved him. They thought he was the greatest guy in the whole world. They said he would just take an issue, listen, and he would come out with something positive. But that all said, of course, he didn't want for anything materially. I think that made him, you know, so he wasn't going to be taken over with, you know, hey, there's a bribe, you know, go away, I don't need it. But the mayors were always Democratic, and the Republicans could never. I mean, look at the cities today. I mean, going back to the days of, you know, Mayor Wagner and Mayor O'Dwyer, they're all Democrats. And it's like, how hard is it, and I say this, to go to somebody in a city and say, look, you're not, you want better, but you're going to have to take a chance here on your own future, because all they're going to keep doing is feeding you the money and the welfare and the this and using you. We see people now, you know, the great part about Twitter is it is an education of society. It's kind of like, you know, somebody saying, I get my news out of a dirty book. Well, it is a dirty book in many respects, but we have discussions. I have frequent discussions with Black Lives Matter in Hartford. Marty, it's shocking. The common ground, the things that we might look at an issue differently, but we're both feeling the same way with different perspectives. And the thing that they're starting to see, which I think frankly is scaring the hell out of Democrats, is like, they've been handing us stuff and they've been giving us stuff, but we're still in the dirt. We're still not going anywhere. And it's like, yeah, your empowerment won't happen until you get them the hell out of the way. But, you know, maybe you're the generation that sees it. But and we're talking on the way over, a great society, right? Lyndon Johnson was going to eliminate poverty forever. And that was 60 years ago.
Yeah, well, it hasn't happened. If anything, it's been exacerbated. The breakdown of the black family.
So happy you mentioned that. You know how that all came about. Go back to 1937. How do I know this stuff? Well, I have radio listeners every Tuesday that want to hear something that they're not, so it forces me to study, forces me to wreck my lives and other things, but that's okay. But that all kind of being is, sorry, Lee, but the Eleanor Roosevelt, as we know, was a great social warrior. Now, she was a social justice warrior who was not today, but she was really concerned about people not having enough. And this is where she and Frank Sinatra became very good friends, because they both felt the same way. They didn't like to see people of color opposed. So she's after Franklin, and she's like, we need to do something for the poor black families. And Franklin's like, well, I can't do that. I mean, I've got the Solid South, who of course was racist as the day is long. So he was able to, you know, keep his wife off his case and get them to buy into it by saying, okay, we'll give you home assistance, but Dad's got to leave the house. Clever. Because this way, he said, this is how we're going to, you know, in effect, decimate the black family. And that's what happened.
Yeah. But it's been exacerbated with Johnson's Great Society.
Exactly.
Because all these financial aid programs, I mean, are contingent upon not having the father in the house.
You know, when I had that discussion with someone, it's like out of all those programs that went on, the only one that survived, I think there was two, was Head Start and the Job Corps. And why? Because they deal with work. This is rocket science, folks. Work, right? Four-letter word.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a, like I say, I mean, the parallels between what was transpiring 160 years ago is amazing.
It really is.
And, you know, what course are we going to chart with the upcoming presidential election? Do you have any strong thoughts on the travails of Trump and his legal issues and the case that ended up in New York, was it last week or the week before?
I'm probably one of the few people that will tell you that Donald Trump is not entirely innocent. Now, is he guilty in a criminal vein? No, he's not. But what he did, in effect, was bad judgment followed by a whole bunch of stupid business practices, and should have known that they were going to start peeking down his shorts to see what size his underwear was. The man had no excuse in doing this. And to carry this thing out to the degree he did, and then come to the American people and say there was no crime, it's like, yes, Mr. President, we know that, but look at what you're putting the country because of, quote unquote, your bad administrative judgment, which has gotten him into trouble before.
I would counterpoint that at the level he's operating at, he's not alone.
Well, yeah, we had right, exactly.
I mean, Clinton.
Oh, yeah, well, sure, yeah.
He was operating out of the Oval Office.
Clinton was that way in Arkansas. I had a very good friend. I haven't spoken to him in years, and it's my fault. This is a highly intelligent, conservative black businessman. Probably makes me look lefty. And he was very involved in programs and things in the city of Little Rock. And Clinton was so bad that when he and Hillary would walk out of the mansion, if you go to Little Rock, it's like you're showing me New London. It's even a tighter city than that. Everybody knew everything. The Rose Law Firm's down the street from the State House. The State House is down the street from where the tavern where they would all hang out. And Bill and Hillary would walk out, and Bill would greet a young lady, and Hillary is just screaming. It's like, well, you stop. You're always, you cannot F her right now. It's like, and it was this whole thing where they knew what he was doing. And they sent him to the White House as an ingenue.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I don't know if you could do that in today's media world, but you certainly could do it then.
Well, you could argue that Trump is doing it.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter to most people.
At a different level, yeah. I think Biden is much worse than Trump. I mean, I think the guy and his family, and they call him the Biden crime family, I buy into that.
Well, I do too. I mean, I had this discussion. I have a lot of discussions. I got to stop discussing things. Maybe this is my personal problem. But someone was telling me that we're talking about a particular political candidate for purposes of this discussion. We don't have to mention his name. And I'm sort of, how could I put it? He is a Republican. He comes out and says he is for a strong domestic energy policy. And it's like, and I've asked him questions. It's like, well, if you are, Mr. Jones, for lack of a better term, in favor of this, do you embrace the Donald Trump energy policy? And people were jumping on my case, Marty, why do you always have to have a litmus test for, why can't you just let people be people? I said, listen, you're the one that personalized Trump. I don't care about, I don't want to see harm come to Donald Trump. I'm not talking about the person, I'm talking about the policy. Do you support the Keystone Pipeline, fracking, drilling?
Yep.
Cheap domestic energy. I don't like spending $6 for my Cheerios, which is all, of course, fuel driven. And the point is, today you can't separate the man from the policy. It's all about the man, and we've all got to focus on the man. We've all got to love the man. And it's like, like the Yukon or the pro-Palestinian you've got to get Israel-based investments, or it used to be fossil fuels, climate change, that's yesterday's news. You got to get that out of the portfolio. So, okay, so what you're saying is you're okay in spending twice your tuition to assuage your personal feelings. Well, I didn't say that. It's the whole idea. It's like, yeah, it's the whole thing. So which I say, I want a president that can keep the border safe. I want a president that can produce cheap energy. I want a president that can keep taxes low. I want a president that could reduce the size of government. Oh yeah, maybe dismantle the administrative state a little bit or a lot, or start on that. I do like the Ramaswamy ideas with respect to that, but other than that, stay out of the way. But you know, we've been so beaten down by this, I don't know what it is, this dependency on government. To Lee's point this morning, we were talking, or he was talking about it. I don't know if we could rise up to that thing of, you know, I'm an American, I have faith in my abilities, and just give me what I need to do in order to do, and I won't bother you, and I'll be a good citizen, and I'll create and I'll grow. But, you know, we've all got to personalize everything, and, you know, the picture of Dick Blumenthal or Ned Lamont, well, that means we're going to eat for another day.
That's a frightening thought.
Isn't it really? But that's where I think a lot of people are, you know, where if you walk into a community and you say, well, you know, and you're a Republican candidate, well, if you vote for him, he's going to take away your EBT card. Well, I didn't ask him that when he was there. And they actually believe this. It's really, that message has never been communicated well at all. Pitiful now. But things would not change unless it were better communicated and articulated and thought out.
And that drum needs to be beat constantly, though. I mean, you just can't make a statement, because it falls on deaf ears or goes in one ear and out the other, never to be conjured up again.
They come in, they might wave, they might, you know, talk a little this or talk a little that, but you know, case in point, Reagan went to President Ronald Reagan went to the South Bronx in 1980.
Yep.
And he talked about, and people asked him, and they were rough on him, and he was rough back, and he told them what he was going to do. Once he was there, he went to Eddie Koch, and they worked on projects together with respect to all of that, and made, really, in the 1980s, a much better city. So it's like, you can't tell me that it can't be done. But
listen, Rudy Giuliani did a terrific job.
Rudy was a great mayor. But you see what Rudy did.
And the slippage since he's been out of there
has
terrible. Been rapid.
Yeah. It's the poor guy. Believe me, some of the things, I've read some of the lawsuits against him, and all I got to say to people is go read them. I'm not going to tell you. It's not, you know, I don't know who's watching this broadcast. I don't want to repeat some of the stuff I've read. But it's Rudy. But Rudy had the idea of, okay, to make the streets safe, you have to clean things up. Yes, you do have to stop people. Doesn't matter what the color are. You do have to frisk them. You do have to walk in a broken window. Michael Bloomberg, actually, in his early mayor, taking from Giuliani, was actually a better mayor than Rudy. But then when the people that were in his orbit were starting to call him names and he saw his empire crumbling, oh boy, he turned tail and ran.
Yeah, well, I mean, but Giuliani was a Republican, and Bloomberg was elected initially as a Republican.
Yes, he was.
I mean, he did a fade, but as you noted, but he came in. So, I mean, Republicans have been elected
in cities.
In cities, in some instances, not very often, or perhaps not for very long. But it can be done.
Well, go back to the days, I mean, of course, we're in New London, Connecticut, but if you grew up in and around New York like I did, John Lindsay. John Lindsay, I guess, died out here about 20 years ago. He was in Essex Meadows, but Mayor John Lindsay, who was a very, I mean, kind of a liberal Rockefeller Republican, and he, I mean, what he did was that he was a charismatic man. When all of the cities in the United States were rioting in the late 1960s, notice there was never a riot in New York. Los Angeles burned down, Detroit burned down, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, just all over the place. But what would John Lindsay do? He would get out and walk the streets and talk to people and make things, you know, he would actually fix things and showed that he cared. Now, the thing is, for some reason, he started to he let the city get dirty and he let the city get out of control. And then one day he just came out and said he was a Democrat, and then I don't know if it was him or Abe Beam. They just spent the thing into oblivion and into bankruptcy. And then they went to beg to Jerry Ford. He told him to drop dead.
I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's, yeah, I don't know what happened there, but I'm sorry, we're coming up on a break, I guess.
No, we just keep on going here. I just, it's interesting how things evolve, though.
It really is, to your point.
Yeah. But one area that I know that you more often than not hone in on when you're on the radio is primarily state stuff as opposed to federal. And I did pull a few pieces from the local rag here in Southeastern Connecticut known as The Day, and because you like to poke holes in our governor. I call him Uncle Ned, but you have got other names that you call him.
King Ned the Unaccountable. Do I like doing it, or do I do it because it troubles me? And
I think it's because it troubles you.
It does. It does. I've seen a lot of, I mean, I go back as a kid in the state. I wasn't here for, I mean, I go back to the days of John Dempsey. Yeah. And I mean, what John Rowland did bothered me. I don't understand in a small state why it's so hard to have policies that help people as opposed to policies that bring more government into their lives and create more dependency and waste more tax money. I mean, we pay an insane amount of taxes. We've got, what, 300 and something. And we never, I mean, it's a lot of money to spend for 49th place, frankly, you know, and it's, I see people, I talk to people, I don't talk to enough of them. I don't get out enough. It's another long story. Thank you for inviting me down here tonight. But it's like, I see people with dreams and aspirations and things, and my biggest concern for them is getting crushed by the idiocy, bureaucracy, and the whim of, you know, fools, morons, and people that just frankly don't fight hard enough for the will of people, and that bothers me. Yeah, because
well, yeah, I mean, I've got.
To your point, that's why I do it.
I mean, I've got peers that they are adamant that when it's time for them to retire, and they're all my peers are at that age, where they're not planning on staying here.
Sticking around, yeah.
They just can't afford it. It's. I mean, and Florida seems to be a primary destination, not 100%, but the finances are better there for retired folks. It may not just be weather. There's other considerations, and Connecticut is not friendly to elderly people and people on fixed incomes,
and people in businesses and people. Homeowners are the most hated people on the planet because we have people in our leadership, and this goes right across the parties. That's like, you know, you are, one side says you're evil and you're environmentally racist if you have a single family home with a yard and maybe that's like you, or you had to live. And then there's other people who I think are buying into a thing of, you know, we need more housing, we need more housing, we need more housing. But yet, you know, we have a poor economy. So how does the need for housing, if there is a need for housing, get sustained without capital, without industry? And nobody really looks at that. And then, you know, we're going through, or looking at the projects you were showing me. I say projects, I don't mean to say that pejoratively, but it's like, and then you drove me by one, which effectively is a pile of rubble, which is like so many of the ones that I knew. And is this the whole thing of government ginned up housing that creates something that eventually turns into a slum, that eventually goes to the ground, that, you know, gives up to drugs and gangs and trouble and things like that? or having, good point, thank you for reminding me. In this whole housing debate, and this is where people will come and they'll bang drums and, you know, call people like me horrible names and things. I don't care, I've been called worse. But it's like, okay, if there is a genuine need for housing, if there is, I'll see you and I'll raise you. Why don't you give these people, other than saying you will pay rent or, you know, quote unquote affordable housing, why don't you give them ownership of the unit? You know, why don't you give them something that they can own, they can manage, they can maintain, and they could sell to somebody for more money and then go to a bigger one and a better one. Give them a sense of ownership as opposed to a sense of dependency. Marty, these people run away faster from you than, you know, than Caitlin Clark on a fast break. It's just unbelievable because they believe government is the solution, where government has been the problem in housing going all the way back to Cabrini Green in Chicago in the 40s. Tell me how you, in Connecticut, in the 2020s, largely affiliated with, a bunch of bird brains, you're going to get it right this time when everybody before you got it wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, when it comes to quote-unquote affordable housing, I mean, I spent 20 years running a home improvement business. And my family,
Your family
my
was in
father
it, yeah.
and my grandfather before that. And, you know, the hypocrisy of the general public is amazing. I mean, when you say the buzzword affordable housing, well, who doesn't want affordable housing? We want people to have a livable wage. Well, who doesn't want a livable wage? Now we're going to build this house, and well, the cost of the 2x4 is X. Mm-hmm. Whether you're building it or I'm building it, it's still X. And the labor costs to build it are going to be, well, at today's rates, $15, $16 an hour minimum. And people will argue that that's not a livable wage. It should be higher. So we want to drive the cost up of labor. And when you have these like a minimum wage creates shortages. Shortages drive up costs. So all you're doing with these false situations here is driving costs up and not making them affordable. You're making them even more expensive. And the only way that you can make them quote unquote affordable is with significant government interference, whether it be through tax breaks, grants, things of that nature, free property. But that's the only way that you get quote unquote affordable housing.
And all you've really done there is you've just you've built a ramp to the road to ruin.
No.
It's just a matter of time.
So I mean, it's and the folks who are barking the loudest on this are the ones who are want it on both sides and get neither. That's the irony of it.
Well, the problem is with the politician, he believes wages could be artificially set. And wages are a function of supply and demand.
That's correct.
For the good or service provided vis-a-vis what a purchaser is willing to pay. Now, if you've got somebody in there saying, well, that should be up and over that, that may make it economically impossible for those two parties to come together. And, you know, I know the people will say, well, you'll have those that will oppress those that are less fortunate. And guess what? That happens in life. It happens in various scales. If you've ever been in a corporation or a law firm and have played at a certain level of the field, you'll know what it's like to be oppressed. You'll know what it's like to walk the floors at 3 in the morning, but that all said. So you will go to a place where you could be better appreciated and make more. The market will seek its own level. It does. It always has. It's like water. It's like the tide. But government doesn't like that because it doesn't buy them votes. It doesn't buy them a place.
No,
it does not buy their
but
existence.
these policies are feel good. They're
Well,
not.
sure.
They're not.
Sure.
I mean, there's a reason why you see these self-service checkouts at grocery stores and Walmart. Labor is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have higher wages, well, we'll have less employees, and you'll check yourself out. I mean, that's an easy example to make.
Well, we had and I think on tomorrow's 30 with Tony, I think we'll discuss this very thing. You walk into your grocery store. This is like the simplest of simple beans. And we'll call your George Marshall book here a box of Cheerios. And in 2019, that was $2.25. It's now $6.25. Now, why is that higher? It is higher for a number of reasons, as you say, the wage of the cost of the burdens of the cost of utilities, the burdens of government. The biggest thing is fuel. Everything we have has a fuel coefficient. The clothes we wear, the truck that bought you this book, that phone, is a petroleum derivative. It's plastic. So
Petroleum's in
everything, everything. So when the jerky,
it's not just automobiles.
yeah. Well, when the jerky Connecticut Democrats come out and say, well, the grocers are gouging us, and the Republicans come out with a little bit of faint opposition and say, well, no, you're just oppressing small business. Does any one of them mention the cost of fuel? Of course not. This is why they listen to the Lee Elsie show. Or they endure me. It's Marty. Sorry. Yeah, I'm all for clean everything, but everything, sorry folks, is driven some kind of way by fuel, and if the cost goes up, well, anyway.
Well, in regards to fuel, there was a piece by a former editorial writer today that Paul Chenier, mitigating climate change is hard, but we have to try, and I fall into the left's category of, I guess you might say, a denier. But I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the clarion call was we're going to get overpopulated and we wouldn't be able to feed everybody.
That was the hot button in the 1970s. You're right.
And then we're going to have another ice age.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, this is all popular stuff here. It's,
well, I think there were a few characters who were saying we were going to start growing out of our shoes. I remember that too.
So I mean, you've got these folks who just get on they kind of fall off the deep edge, and they, what's the issue of the day we can grab a hold of and make into a clarion call. And,
well, I'm so happy you mentioned that, because a lot of this would be Tuesday's radio segment this past week on the Lee Elsie show. That would have been June 2nd. I'm sorry, June 4th. This whole thing of climate change and, shall we say, the equity movement, not equality, not ability, but equity and all that. I mean, this was not something that was conjured up by politicians. This was conjured up by the consulting firms of the universe, i.e. McKinsey, i.e. Boston Consulting, in, quote unquote, ushering in the next normal. So your average garden variety politician walking down the street 5 years ago wouldn't know climate change from an ice cream soda. But if you present to them climate change, oh yeah, this is what I've got to do. They're believers in what they've been told. They're not believers in what they themselves found out. These are things that are generated for them, because a lot of money to be made in climate change. And I'm not, I think we should do whatever we could to preserve the environment, but I'm not going to try to, use water to run my propane stove. I mean, I need propane. It's so irrational. It gets beyond how can I put it? It gets beyond anything having to do with sanity whatsoever.
I mean, New London, actually it's a state,
Yeah.
but it happens to be housed in New London at the state pier. Has gone full bore with this wind, and it just the costs have grown exponentially out of control. We've now gotten, it's just recently reported, a giant boat that has been built for the purpose of transporting these things, and it can't fit into the harbor. What good is it? I mean, that's just pre-planning. Unintended consequences seem to be something that's never considered.
Well, and how could I put it? I am an animal lover, and I'm sorry. Do we have a caller?
Well, I'm not sure. Do we have a call there, Drew? Well, he's not. I'll wait for the thing to come up on the board. Oh, we do. We'll go right to it. Good evening, and you're on the air.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's good to hear from you, Mr. Angelo.
Oh, thank you. Please call me Tony.
I heard you mention the Elsie before, so, I listened to you there.
Thank you.
And anyway, I started thinking about a dozen different things to ask, but I finally settled on something here. New London is a one vote government, and that should be changed. Anyway, if you notice, when you drove around, there are a lot more apartments.
Marty showed me.
And condos, and apartments, and condos. No, but nobody is mentioning that right now, for years, New London has been supplying water to neighboring towns and also supplying sewer service to surrounding towns. And I won't even mention the prices. The thing of it is, with all of these new people supposedly coming into town, and by the way, 60% of the housing in town already is low income. So I don't know how much more is going to get added. And I'm just wondering, a few years back, we had a water shortage and everybody, had to go on to rationing. Now we're going to add, I don't know how many thousand people. So I'm just wondering, what are we going to do when we run out of water and our sewer plant overflows every day? Maybe you can answer some of that, but I've only got about 1,000 other questions for you, but we'll save that for another day.
Larry, thank you so much for calling.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay.
Okay, we'll respond to your queries here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Night night.
All right.
Night night.
Good night.
Okay.
Well, interesting points. I mean, when you increase the demand for something, and then you.
Well, it goes to show you. I mean, how many times have you seen things built in Connecticut? It's like, oops, we forgot about that. And then what are we doing? We're floating bonds that, to pay for the, and probably the most stressful day in Connecticut government is, of course, July 1st, which is when the bonds come due, and you wait for that one day. It's like, oh, don't forget the money, that kind of thing. I mean, in the trust business, I've been staying away from Connecticut debt for years, because when that happens, it's not going to be, you're not going to see this, you're going to see bang. It'll be that, and it's not like municipalities have not become, shall we say, highly unmarketable before. But what do you do? Was there thought given to that? And it doesn't sound like it. Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, Are we going to solve it here in 15 minutes? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. One thing I wanted to just touch on quickly, getting back to the cost of doing business in Connecticut. And now this was actually this morning's paper. Lamont leads celebration of Connecticut's paid sick leave expansion for small business.
Isn't that something?
It's not expensive enough to run a business, but to mandate
Well, you see, this is just it.
paid sick leave across the board.
How hard is it to look and to say what states succeed and what states fail without bells, without whistles, without tricks? Like I'm reading today, special session of the legislature. Lamont's trying to twist arms for some banking bill because he says, we want to make a concession to get somebody here. So again, guys like you and me are going to be paying for some DECD bribe subsidy, which eventually will end up in disaster and somebody moving out. And that all said, it's like, why does the government have to tell me how to treat my employees? If I treat them well, they will stay without the assist of government. If I treat them poorly, they will leave and or I will go out of business. Things will determine themselves. But the thing is, it's all where you see that and where they want to paint it to you as a human rights issue and that sort of thing. It ain't nothing but big labor, tossing dollars to get everybody into this thing of, well, you're not being, you need to unionize, you need to, and they become very creative about that.
But it's legislation such as this.
Will drive people out.
It drives business out
Absolutely.
and people out into more affordable and friendly environments.
Yeah.
Where you can conduct business and people can thrive. One thing you mentioned at the top, and you use this term every week. The governor, the unaccountable, and we have a local column from everybody's favorite columnist, David Collins, and this goes back to May 18th. Mm-hmm. How did Lamont miss what the FBI calls blatant stealing?
Easy, he didn't look. Or he wanted you not to see that.
And you've got Konstantinos Diamantis. This guy's running a racket here with the state and at the highest level. And doing it apparently in a vacuum. It's... And you track this stuff more closely than I do at the state level.
People think I'm being cute and funny when I say the unaccountable, but his unaccountability there is a cloak for his inability or unwillingness to actually get in and fix things. He blows things off with a line. He, pets and supports his hand-picked media who cover for him. And there's never any critical, other than like what I might do or what George Colley might do or some of the others, Bob Swick. There's nobody hitting them where they need to be hit. And I consider my function to make his job harder. And they don't like the fact now that because of people asking these questions, the politician's job's a whole lot harder than it used to be. And you know something? It should be, because it needs to be. Because these are times, and I've been on the short end of the stick with a small business for years and years and years. Am I vengefully bitter? No, but I do think that, enough is enough. And the gold standard for all this, Marty, was COVID-19, which, as we saw this week, came down from on high to the Faucis of the world, to the governors of the world, using a consulting firm, and the poor guy's got to close his pizza shop saying, what the hell is going on here? And didn't have to do it. And, lives ruined, marriages ruined, families broken up. That's the part that troubles me.
Yeah, that should be troubling to everybody.
It should be. It should be. I'm not even a dad.
Yeah, well, it's not good, and you know, and what it's done to education. I mean, we've lost. How much have we lost in education? Will we ever recover?
Because the teachers union, which should be, and again, you know, I'm not pro-union, anti-union, which should be, we are for the education of children and support our teachers in doing it, went to protect the teacher at the expense of the children. And who was involved in social distancing? And that was not Governor Ned Lamont drafting that policy. If you believe that, you will hand me a cape and I will go to the tallest building in New London and jump down thinking I can fly. That was McKinsey, that was Boston Consulting, who gave the politicians these concepts, and all they did was parrot them to the detriment of us all. Boy, I'm hot tonight.
Well, we always have an engaging discussion, that's for sure.
Let's see if I make it out of town.
Yeah. You know, we're getting down to our last moment or two here, and the one thing I just wanted to touch on quickly, women's basketball has been in the news, and this young lady who was the #1 pick after setting collegiate records for scoring, Caitlin Clark, has moved on to the professional ranks, and it seems the pros...
They're roughing her up a little bit.
I think beyond a little bit. I think and I'm puzzled by this because she's bringing an extraordinary amount of visibility to the women's basketball at all levels, and she's generating revenue, which ought to at some point start to raise everybody's salaries. They ought to be going, welcome aboard and thank you, as opposed to beating the living bejesus out of her. I mean, she got cold-cocked almost the other night.
And that's interesting, you know, and how could I haven't studied it to the degree that you have or Lee has, and it's, there's a part of me that says, you're a professional athlete and you've got to deal with it. You got to deal with what they hand you. It's another thing when people do treat you unfairly to the point of maybe not even realizing that if she breaks a leg, you know, they may be thrown out of their apartment or something like that. I mean, I think you should play hard and appreciate the fact that you play hard and not play the crybaby act, but it would be nice if the league said, you know, we're here to play a sport and we're not here for purposes of social justice. That's well, another show. That's
another show, and I don't mind having that show. Well, it looks to me like we're come to the end of this particular show. And Tony, I want to thank you for coming on again.
Thank you.
For those folks who are a fan of Tony's, he's scheduled to come back on in August.
Yeah, I believe.
And so look forward to that. And folks, we'll see you again next week on City Focus. Good night.
Good night, everybody.